So Israeli war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu has put British Foreign Secretary David Lammy in his place by refusing to meet him during his recent visit to Israel. Lammy had traveled to Israel, his second trip in less than 2 months' time since he became the Foreign Secretary. This time, he was being accompanied by his French counterpart. Lammy and his government had made a huge deal out of this trip by claiming that the UK and France were playing a lead role in preventing a regional war in the Middle East. That's what he had claimed. However, Israeli terrorists had other ideas. They decided to welcome him by setting hundreds of Palestinians' houses and properties on fire and killing a Palestinian man in the occupied West Bank. A shameless Lammy was seen saving his face by telling reporters that war criminal Netanyahu had assured him of a swift investigation. He said this with a straight face, that a criminal had assured him that he will be investigating his own crime.
The scenes overnight of the burning and the torching of buildings, of the Molotov cocktails thrown at cars, of the widespread rampage and chasing of people from their homes is abhorrent, and I condemn it in the strongest of terms. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that there will be a swift investigation. I hope that that investigation can ensure that those who've engaged in this settle of violence over the course of the last 24 hours are brought to justice. And I raised a few weeks ago, when I was on the West Bank, that both the violence and the expansion that we have seen over recent times is unacceptable. It breaches international norms and, of course, the domestic legal norms here in Israel.
However, now we know he was lying to save his embarrassment. Netanyahu had refused to establish any contact with him to protest the UK government's reported decision to not go ahead with his objections in the ICC arrest warrant against two Israeli war criminals, namely Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister. Rishi Sunak had decided to challenge the arrest warrant applications in the ICC by the chief prosecutor Karim Khan. This was widely being viewed as an attempt by the British government, previous conservative government, to delay the ICC proceedings against Netanyahu and his war criminal cabinet colleague Yoav Gallant. The Keir Starmer government decided to not go ahead with those objections at the ICC. This, according to several media reports, including one by Times of Israel, angered Netanyahu, who refused to meet Lammy during his recent visit. Now, Lammy shared a video from his social media about his Israel trip to talk about the so-called diplomatic efforts.
I'm here in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories with my French counterpart, Minister Sejourné, to urge for de-escalation and an end to the war in Gaza. We stand together on the UK and France's first joint foreign ministers' visit in more than a decade, because this message is so vital. We promised we would reconnect Britain.
Nous sommes pleinement mobilisés avec nos alliés et nos partenaires dans la région pour arrêter cette spirale de violence.
It's not only in the interests of civilians bearing the brunt of the horror and the suffering, as we have heard today when visiting the Red Crescent Aid Warehouse.
Ce n'est pas non plus dans l'intérêt de la région qui est au bord d'une guerre totale, avec la reprise des pourparlers sur le cessez-le-feu cette semaine. Nous devons nous concentrer sur la possibilité d'une paix, d'une libération inconditionnelle de tous les otages et d'un cessez-le-feu immédiat et durable.
This conflict needs to end, Together, the United Kingdom and France will keep on doing the hard diplomatic work we need to open a path to long-term peace.
The fact that Foreign Secretary was requesting for a meeting with a war criminal and that war criminal refuses to oblige his request just shows the pathetic reputation enjoyed by British politicians globally these days. This also shows a spectacular failure of British diplomacy. This is not the first time that war criminal and bloodthirsty Netanyahu has decided to express his displeasure against his backer country. In March, he cancelled his planned trip to the US to protest against the Biden administration's decision to not veto a UN Security Council resolution calling for an end to genocide by the Israeli terrorists. This is precisely what a ceasefire resolution in the context of the Gaza genocide meant: bringing an end to the massacres of innocent and unarmed Palestinians. This is how the State Department minion Matthew Miller had reacted then.
Israeli delegation is not coming here. How will the US be able to present its alternative proposals to Israel since they're not going to be here this week?
So I saw the statement from the government of Israel. I would say it was a bit surprising and unfortunate. The UN Security Council resolution that passed today, from which the United States abstained, there were issues issues with which we had concerns related to that resolution. The fact that it did not condemn Hamas's terrorist attacks of October 7th. That's why we didn't vote for it. But the reason we didn't veto it is because there were also things in that resolution that were consistent with our long-term position. Most importantly, that there should be a ceasefire and that there should be a release of hostages, which is what we understood also to be the government of Israel's position. So it is a bit surprising and unfortunate that they're not going to apparently attend these meetings.
Just so you know, Israel has killed and has been killing more than 6 babies and 60 children every single day in Gaza since 7th of October. That's how barbaric these Israeli terrorists have been. And to imagine that they have enjoyed and continue to enjoy the backing of the so-called civilized West in carrying out the brutal murder of these babies and children every day says a lot about the Western countries and their attitude towards human rights and lives of innocent children around the world. Israel has violated the United Security Council resolution on ceasefire. Then it also violated 2 orders by the International Court of Justice. On both the occasions, the ICJ ordered Israel to inform the world's top court about the steps that it had taken to stop the genocide in Gaza. You know what Israel did? It ignored. The ICJ then ruled that Israel was illegally occupying Palestinian land. Did the rogue regime of Israel face any international sanctions? No. Here is what former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has to say. He's saying exactly the same thing.
Well, you can't get much stronger than the International Court of Justice saying what's going on are acts of genocide against the Palestinian people. You would have thought a country that has had that judgment against it would get a few sanctions imposed on it, wouldn't you? Isn't that kind of how it works? Isn't that sort of normal? And then the International Criminal Court judgment that's been made against Netanyahu and others, which the British government sort of eventually came around to saying it would accept the judgment of the ICC. Actually, the British government has no choice. It has no choice whatsoever. I was in Parliament when we joined the International Criminal Court, when we signed up to the Rome Statute. There was a move by various, mainly Tory MPs, to try and exempt Britain from various parts of it, particularly the role of the military, but none of that was carried, and the thing went through in its entirety. Britain is signed up to the International Criminal Court. We are bound by its judgments. Its arrest warrants have to be carried out. It's an obligation. And so the idea that the British government sort of grandly said eventually they'd accept the judgment and stop challenging it, well, they did drop the challenge, good, and that was only because of a lot of pressure from a lot of people around the country. But again, if there's an arrest warrant out for the Prime Minister of a country, you'd have thought there would be at least a reconfiguration of diplomatic relations with that country, rather than saying we're going to carry on as normal, including the supply of weapons, overflying and allowing RAF Akrotiri to be used as a staging point in the delivery of weapons to Israel. So our demands on the British government are quite simply this: abide by international law now.
That's the twisted and lawless world we are living in. Whilst Lammy was in Israel, his Israeli counterpart bluntly said that he expected. Yes, pay attention to the word expected. According to the Israeli minister, his country expected the United Kingdom to defend Israel if Iran launched retaliatory attacks to avenge the Israeli attack on Tehran to kill Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. Now you tell me, what does it say about the global standing of the UK when a rogue country like Israel says it expects the UK to be at its beck and call? Who would have thought that the UK's corrupt politicians would wreck the country's reputation so much that a former global power will be reduced to a colony of a rogue country called Israel? All because politicians of this country decided to sell their soul and dignity for a few thousands of pounds. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.